Okay, in this video, we're just going to wrap up a few loose ends. And I realized in the last video, I left out adding the trees as what we're going to do between now and the camera movement. So obviously we're going to add the trees. Um, but for this video, we're just going to wrap up the train animation itself and make sure all of that is set correctly. So the first thing you want to play with is the actual speed of the train. So it looks like it's moving the right speed in relation to the landscape around it. So I'm going to hit play, and I feel like that is a little bit too slow. And the wheels, I just noticed, look like they're not quite turning to the right speed. So I will deal with that in a minute. For right now, let's just get the speed of the train correct, and then we'll double check what's going on with the wheels. So if I want it to go faster, the frames to complete one lap should be a smaller number. So I have 10,000. I'm just going to divide that by 2, and the train will jump locations. And I am going to increase the end frame so it'll keep playing. So I want it to go a little faster than that. So let's divide this by 2 again. And I think that is getting to be a little bit better speed, maybe a little bit less. Let's subtract 500 and see how this looks. So obviously you can make it go as fast or slow as you want. I will say if you get it going too fast, you're going to notice a few glitches with the smoke. It's going to have gaps because it's moving faster than the particle system is shooting out particles. So you'll see that, but you have to have it going really fast for that to happen. And I haven't quite found a way to fix that to increase the amount emitted between frames. And I've looked for a bit, but anyway, if you run into that problem, just let me know. Okay, so I'm happy with this speed. So I'm going to stop the animation and go back to frame 1. And what I would like to do is set the end frame to the point where it just kind of loops around. I don't anticipate having animation where it goes all the way around, but I just want to have a rough idea where it's going to start and end, and I can kind of plan my shots for the camera around that. So right now it's at this point. So if I just increase the current frame, and you can just left click and drag, and you can see that my train is just moving around the track as I move my mouse. And that's roughly the start point. So I'm just going to set this to 2000 frames. And we'll go with that as the start and end frame. Okay. Next, let's look at our particle system. So I'm going to hit play just for a second so I can select the smoke. And let's go to the particle settings here in the properties panel. And what I'm looking at is the number of particles I have, 32,000, that last over 1,000 frames. So that's roughly 32 particles per frame. Now, if that's too many, you can adjust these numbers, but if you're happy with it, I'm just going to keep this as a rough estimate. So if I want 32 particles per frame, and I started with 1,000 frames, but my animation goes to 2,000, that means I need to double both these numbers to have this same amount of particles. So I can take the end frame, change that to 2,000. I can take whatever number this is and just multiply it by 2. Your numbers may vary. So let's say that you had 1,500 frames and you had roughly 15 particles per frame. You could just type in the equation and hit enter, and Blender will do that math for you. But for mine, let's backtrack here. So 3,200 times 2, and 2,000 for the end frame. And we'll hit play just to make sure everything seems to be working okay. So now the particle should last the entire 2,000 frames. Next, I'm going to add a turbulence force to make the smoke act a little more realistically, because when it comes out, it's going to change temperatures It's going to hit currents of air. It's going to move up and down in different ways, and turbulence will kind of mimic that effect. So if you're happy with the smoke the way it is, you don't have to add this. But if you want to have a bit more realistic movement to the smoke, I'm going to hit Shift A and add a force field, and we're going to go near the bottom for turbulence. And if we come to the properties panel under the physics tab, we have the settings. We're going to change a couple of things, and I'll give you the numbers that seem to work well for me. And then you can play with those numbers and try to get some different effects if you want. So I would recommend changing the shape from point to plane. So my understanding, a point is like you have a little spot in the middle and it kind of affects everything around it. A plane means you have this infinite flat surface that everything is affected by, which works better for this large scene. Next, let's look at strength. And from experimenting, I found that 0.5 seemed to work pretty well. For size, we're going to go with 10, flow 0.3. And if you want to change the noise, that just changes the random patterns that occur. So once we've hit those, I'm going to go back to frame 1 and hit play and just kind of look at how it's behaving. So you can see it's got a little more movement to it. You can change the flow to a smaller number like 0.2 or 0.1. Oh, sorry. We don't want to go that way. 0.2, 0.3. Oh, let's go back to frame 1 here. Sorry. The smaller the number, the more the smoke is going to move around. So it's going to shoot up higher. It's going to have more of wiggle. And part of this is controlled by your settings on the particle system. So the numbers I give you may not have exactly the same effect. So you can play with these until you get an effect you like. You can also select your particle system and change the lifetime so they stay on the screen longer if you want. So if you want the smoke to stay in view longer and trail off to have a bigger tail, so to speak, you can change that. If you want to change the scale, keep in mind we used the hidden objects and we selected all the icospheres to change that. So if you want them to be smaller or larger, you can play with that number. So at this point, play with all the settings, make sure the smoke is the way you want it, because the next step will be baking the particle simulation. And to kind of explain that, every time I start from the beginning and hit play, Blender is having to recalculate all the locations of all the particles and all the movements. So the computer is having to refine the numbers and do that. If you bake it, it will store those numbers. And instead of having to process and find where these particles are at, it's already stored and the computer doesn't have to do as much work. Once you bake it, if you change the speed of your train or if you change the shape of the track, the smoke isn't going to update. And if you bake it and you make changes, we can go through the process of unbaking it and updating the changes. But for now, if you think everything is the way you want it, I will show you how to bake the particle system. So you're going to select your particle system. We're going to go to the settings and we're looking for cache. And when you're ready, before you do this, it's probably wise to hit save just in case something goes wrong. Okay. Once you have saved, we'll look at the cache and we're going to hit bake. And this will take a few minutes, so I'll probably hit bake and then kind of end this video. The only thing I'll say is once you have hit bake and it finishes the process, make sure you save and then you can move on to the next video. So we'll hit bake and you'll notice here at the bottom, you do have a percentage of the process. So it's going a little faster than I thought it was going to, but just wait until this is done. And once that finishes, hit save, and then we'll move on to the next video.